Hello and welcome to Monarchism Unfiltered. I'm one of your hosts, McCosk,
I'm your other host, Bronze.
and for a change of pace, we have a guest again. Say hello to our guest, Juanito.
Hello, it is an absolute honor to be here with you wonderful gentlemen.
Indeed. On today's episode, or today's episode topic, pick one, we decided to breach the topic of education. Again, a somewhat common topic on this podcast, and we brought Juanito here because he is an actual educator as well.
He's our
So
man
his
on the
ins-
inside, as it were.
his insider knowledge of the Anglo-American education system, specifically the American part of that, uh, brings new insights. Take it away, Juanito.
Wow, that is a general opening. Woo! It is a there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of issues. I think generally, if we're gonna say that there is a crisis in the American education system, I think it is a crisis that its root is where a lot of America's issues are, and a lot of Anglo-American issues are, and it comes to the philosophical underpinnings of the United States and how they've changed over time. In particular, I think you can argue that education is the same problem that American urban planning is or has, which is the belief that came out of the Second World War, this, or shall I say, out of the civil rights, well, the not civil rights era so much as the great society of Lyndon Johnson. This idea that everybody, absolutely everybody, can equally succeed, and not just equally succeed. Everyone, if given the same exact resources, everyone would be a genius almost. And you have an education system which has continuously removed every path other than the one generally assigned path of going to university and getting a job, going through liberal arts, basically. Our education system is only geared for one single thing, and any suggestion that you should gear it for anything else is met with a cry of classism or discrimination of some type. Even if it's normally it's classism. Actually, it's generally the situation that if you suggest, for example, how about trade school or how about becoming something that doesn't require university, you end up with the cry that you're disadvantaging the children that don't come from wealthy families. The result is pushing everyone in the direction of the liberal arts universities. As you can imagine, not everyone actually wants to go there or desires to go there, but you end up with schools that do nothing but send people there, resulting partially in the terrible education outcomes that you see in inner city and rural schools in this country, where children who, in all likelihood, have interest outside of those areas are thrown into a curriculum that does them no service whatsoever. And the teachers know it. The teachers feel it, you know, thoroughly.
Hmm. So what you're saying is that although the system presents like the illusion of choice of picking up your major and minor, etc., 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 like the external pressures that exist, both and the structural and the structural it's God. I only know the Portuguese word um, belittling. I guess would go of like practical education means that everyone is forced into a single path, and that because everyone is forced into that single path, their degrees and etc. get devalued, and it compounds infinitely into a worse scenario.
That is definitely part of it. That's a large chunk of it at the top end, but it's even worse than that. Go to the level of high school. We used to have technical schools in the United States. It was a very common thing. We had different educational tracks in high school. In the 1960s, this idea was declared pretty much discriminatory. And it was
Say that, man.
understandable.
Yeah, civil rights and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. It was, I mean, and it was true that in high schools
It
in
was
this
used
era,
indiscriminately.
it wasn't necessarily used discriminatorily. It was that the educational system effectively maintained the sort of class system of the era where children from very well educated upper class families went to the education track, went to the liberal arts, they studied, calculus, they studied advanced English classes and sociology, where kids who came from working class African American, Italian, and Hispanic families went to mechanic school. This was clearly, there was something going wrong here. However, people blamed the education system entirely for this, or not entirely, but they basically said this was perpetuated by the education system. When in fact, I mean, we all know that if you come from a very well educated family, regardless of your ethnicity, if you come from a very well educated family, you're likely to have aptitudes that are different from someone whose father was a mechanic. And it also was discriminatory because like you said, there was this belittling of manual labor in the Western countries starting in this time. There was this feeling that every student needed to go into the more prestigious careers. Everyone wanted to go to university. There
Yeah,
was a thing in the 19 yeah. Go on.
theoretical education.
Yes. There's a thing that came out, especially in the 1980s. Every student should go to college. We really pushed that post World War. And it only built with the Great Society all the way through the 1980s. We tried to get every student into university possible. And so one way of doing this was by clipping away all the other options, which was worsened by deindustrialization. Once
Yeah.
in the 1980s, you had the Republican Party stripped away the factories that the people who went to mechanical school relied on to survive. Well, now there really is no other option. You either go to theoretical education or you work in McDonald's.
And then work in McDonald's again. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no,
I'm
I mean, you are taking it on an interesting angle because, like, I'll admit, like, it's not like me and Bronze here are like we don't we didn't exactly like spend much time in the previous episodes discussing the 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 effects of practical education, but you do have a point. Some
I would
people
say
just
that me and Mikosk are firmly ensconced in the liberal arts fortress.
Oh,
yes.
clearly. I mean, I am as well. I mean, I taught university, so yes, I'm as well. But I also recognize that.
Oh no, no, I'm in no way disagreeing. I'm just saying it's not. We might not be mindful of it in the same way.
Right. I come from a very working class family. Right. I'm the second to go to university. Um, we're in the New York area, so a lot of my uncles, they're union guys, right? They work, like I have an uncle that worked for the railways, another uncle that worked in construction, but they had good, solid union jobs. They went to high school, technical school, graduated, they were set for life. Worked in shipbuilding as well. Their children have no similar opportunity. Those jobs simply don't exist. Therefore, even though they come from working class families, they really only had a choice but to try and get into theoretical education, which is a disadvantage. There is simply a disadvantage when you're, a working class kid. You didn't grow up reading Shakespeare. You didn't grow up reading Tolkien, and you're thrown into a school system which is full of other working class kids who are in a similar situation, and the teacher's responsibility is to somehow make you equals to kids in wealthy suburbs. You can imagine it's a very near impossible task.
Yeah, because like through life experiences, you then develop the necessary attitudes, etc., etc., etc. And the psychology of the entire thing is often the psychology of the whole thing is quite disheartening. But still, like even if because let's be honest here, the fears that a focus in the U.S. in practical education would be just classism, is not all told unjustified. So, but clearly, like an alternative gateway into university or anything of the sort would help, because you do have a point. Not everyone, it's very hard to translate this into ways that don't sound horrifyingly classist, because like, yes, we live in a society that assumes that yes, everyone must have a university education, and yada yada yada, with good reason. A university education gives a lot of skills and abilities that are useful, even if not necessarily in finding a job, in other things. But at the same time, it first devalues like, again, this is very common in Europe, bachelor licenciatures, licentiates, which are like the entry level. To give it a context to Anglo Americans, it's like it's either a strong bachelor's degree or
Bachelor with honors. That's
yeah,
that was
with,
that's what
bachelor with,
you know.
Understood.
Or a week normal degree, because it's usually 3 years as opposed to 5. And like, basically, to give a bit more social context, like, this was the thing you had to go. You only went further, like get your master's and your doctorate and what have you, if you were really like egghead, dedicated to the field, have that passion, yada yada yada. Like the licentiate was what you needed to get a job. Like, you had that, you were employable, period. No matter, well, of course there was, well, not quite, because we don't have majors and minor systems there. So whatever degree you pick, you are employable. You cannot kind of fuck yourself over by essentially picking 2 degrees that you majors and minors that you very much like but aren't employable, which I really dislike the major and minor structure, because it's just pre-selection for employers. But as I was saying, due to the fact that everyone in Portugal and the rest of Europe is essentially has licentiates, there's been a tremendous inflation and unprecedented, the opposite of prestige.
Yes.
Basically now to get employed you require multiple licentiates or a master's as well. Like, there has been an inflation that rather than facilitating people's access to education, has in fact put pressure on them to take even more education, that in no way actually aids them finding jobs or getting necessarily better qualifications, because masters and majors is well, sadly, and as we talked in a previous episode, is really just publish or die. You'll be taught how to write quickly and efficiently, and maybe a couple of other things, and study things in more detail, sure, but by and large you will be working your ass off for a course you will be paying, rather than the other way around most of the time. It's also a negative aspect we have to take into account. But at the same time, it's very difficult to say to someone, maybe people shouldn't all go to university, is not something that goes down well, no matter the context.
You're absolutely right, yes. We see the same thing here. The example I'll give is high school. My mother is a high school math teacher. At one time, a high school degree was, in fact, optional in this, because this was a factory town. So even a high school degree was semi-optional. It was a great thing to have. If it didn't, you could still survive. In America, if you don't have a bachelor's, you're screwed. So a high school diploma is just a piece of paper. Literally, They are ordered now. My mother is towards the end of her career, so she started back in the 80s, early 80s. She's now at the point where her superiors order her. You have to give the students passing grades. We have no choice. We have to pass them. You cannot give them a grade that's lower than an X number. In other words, completely devaluing the high school diploma. Everyone has one. And you're right to this extent. The bachelor's degree. A bachelor's degree before 2008, we were told, was, a bachelor's degree was the key to a job. Everyone who had a bachelor's degree would have a great job. Yeah, right. That's, like you said, people are getting second and third master's degrees, which, in actuality, their actual value is questionable, but it just, like you said, is a pre-selection for the company who looks at you and says, "Oh, well, he knows how to work hard."
Yeah. The majors and minor systems, because I hope since now that the idea hasn't caught off, and like actual government's budget cuts have been had a once in a million lifetime chance of being positive impact. Because back when I was in uni, there was a lot of talks of adopting the majors and minor system and how it was so good and etc. etc. But it's like self-evident that that's not the case, because you just create a lose-lose scenario where it is possible for a person unwittingly to pick a major and a minor that is utterly unemployable, as opposed to like to any of the courses, like even the quote unquote unemployable courses, like the ones that have the lowest employment rate, which are like the more esoteric ones related to the humanity, like psychology, sociology, etc., etc., etc. Like, you still get a pretty firm grounding in like statistics, working with various programs that actually help you land an office job,
And
consultation work.
even more general skills like critical thinking, looking at sources, writing.
Yeah, like the generalist approach has its benefits, although one might point out that that generalist approach is goes too much in line of education exists so you can get a job, rather than education exists for the edification of the human being, which is another element in this discussion.
Oh God, yes, geez. Oh, ho, ho, ho. Now this is where I can bring in my other experience, because the university I taught in a university in Asia, in a communist state, which used some weird derivation of the Soviet education system, which is entirely, you study only the thing that your major is. You do economics, you only study nothing else. There's nothing else of any relevance to you. You don't study history, you don't study English, the languages, you don't study anything but the thing related to your degree. And that results in very strange people. I swear, it's very strange. Like doctors who have zero idea of ethics. And this is people generally talk about it, the fact that doctors have no actual, grounding in ethics or virtues whatsoever in these countries. They have no idea why something is good, why they shouldn't do something. It's just, oh well, I'm getting paid, so I do the medicine, and he doesn't die. Leads to weird things.
Yeah, it's the yeah, it just gives too narrow a view, that is too narrow. But can't the same criticism be issued to like practical education, for example? At least in a historical perspective, it's not been exactly famous for, I don't know, cultivating an appreciation in ethics.
Oh, it's absolutely true. Yes, that is the weakness of it. But I think there's a slight difference between. And you see, this is the problem with this is yeah, you're right. It's almost impossible to make this not sound classist. But I kind of think most people would expect a medical doctor with 10 years of university to have a slightly wider breadth of knowledge than a mechanic.
I mean, I can understand that. Like, there is a thing about like expectations, etc. But I think we, rather than go like, I don't think anyone I don't think anyone here, will say that, oh, more paths, more alternatives, more choice for your higher education is a bad thing. I don't think anyone here is saying that, or that anyone who defends a bigger investment in practical education says they want to do that. So I do think that from the angle of opening up as an alternative is valid, but like, God, because like we're only focusing on like the institutional aspect. We're like not even focusing on the most brutal and depressing aspect of it all. Because like we're talking, oh, you come from poor families, so you have a statistical predisposition to remain poor. The truth of the matter is that the correlation between being born poor and staying poor, while historically in the grand scheme of things very strong in the past, by the advent of today, and well, also modern census, not census data, it's just statistics and like better tactics and data recording, etc. We now know that the correlation is not so much poverty v wealth, though there is still a correlation there, but it's not as strong as previously expected. The correlation where it's very strong is structured versus destructured families. Even if wealthy, you come from a destructured family, you will do shit all at university. You might have the inherited wealth that means you don't slide back into poverty, sure, especially if you're very rich, but like upper middle class families, that's often a story. Like, yeah, we used to be rich. Turns out the family at this particular generation became utterly dysfunctional. The sons or daughters, or both, just fucking sunk. Because, like, that's where the strong correlation is, I think.
Oh, no, you're 150%
this is just
right.
statistic evidence. I can't quote exactly a study right here, right now, but I would have to go look at it. I would have to go search for it, but this is from a study.
Oh no, yeah, the studies, the data is in. It's just that the data is heretical. You can't say that, unfortunately. You can't, like, in the United States education system, anyone who would say that would be fired. That's partially because
that there is a statistical correlation about the structured families and like. Well, and like academic success, like that. That's
you can't
absurd.
say that. Wait, why is that absurd? You mean the fact that you can't say it?
Yeah, the fact that you can't say that, because that does not strike me as inherently racist.
It isn't, except that, well, unfortunately, in the 1980s, and it really started in the 1980s, the stereotype. Oh god, this goes into American history way too much, but it became a thing for the right to in order to criticize welfare, to assign every time a single mother was brought up, they always tried to pin it as a black person. So there became a society-wide association with single motherhood and black women, despite the fact that this is not. I mean, it's not.
It's not statistically the case.
No, there are as many, single mothers that are not black as there are that are black. Unfortunately, that's not the case in the wealthy suburbs. In the wealthy suburbs, where it's majority white and majority middle class, you of course have a much lower rate of, single motherhood because it's wealthy suburbs.
Yeah, but that's like a pointless statistic, because like that's not randomic. You're not learning anything if your sample size is rich suburb.
Yes, I know, but welcome to America, where we have some very strange views on things. I'm going to leave it at that. We have very strange views on race.
Well, yes. First, you believe race is real.
Deeply. Deeply. It's deep in people's minds. But yes, if you make that assertion, that people will take it as if you're declaring that single or that dysfunctional families cause children to have problems, you're basically throwing the urban poor under the bus, because the urban poor has the largest percentage, supposedly, of dysfunctional families, even though that's no longer true in the United States because you have a huge number of rural poor in the same situation, but the media ignores them.
Yeah, urban. Again, keeping with my magical power of failing to remember fucking the names of anything. That's the current statistic. African American poor families are, largely speaking, outcompeting poor rural white Americans.
Yes, but for some reason, and I don't know the root of this, something happened again. It was mid-century America where the rural white population dropped off everyone's radar. It became this very black. I'm sorry, pun. Black and white dichotomy of suburban whites versus minority urban blacks. Everyone else fell off the radar of the media and the news media, and so everything got defined in these weird terms of wealthy suburban whites versus the poor minorities in the city. Anything that was dysfunctional families, welfare mothers, all of these became synonyms for urban black and Hispanics, and you can't say them anymore. It's weird. It's weird, and I mean, it was blame the American right for using dog whistles.
You don't have to ask me twice.
That makes sense to me.
I gladly blame them for so many other things.
Yes, the Republican Party, again, I didn't want to get into this. The Republican Party in the 1980s really went all in on the, racial profiling, plus if you work hard, you will succeed libertarianism. Put those two together and it becomes, black people lazy and many other bad things, therefore they don't work hard, therefore they fail, therefore we abandon them, and the inner cities are let to rot and die. Thus why education system gets, any association with let's have multiple options comes off as racist Republicans.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult environment. But clearly, the system must be aware that it is failing ham over fist.
I'm terrified to tell you this.
High school, how the amount of people actually managed to finish high school was also decreasing. This was the statistic. This exact point of data is actually fairly old. I remember reading about this in 2012. So maybe, I don't know. It's been fixed since, but
for some reason it seems unlikely that it's been fixed.
Oh, it's been fixed because they're not allowed to fail students anymore.
Oh, okay. So they
strange definition of fixed.
Yes, they broke it harder. No, you're right. The system
is that there is the system in of itself isn't aware that it's failing anymore because you're deciding to.
Well, systems have a very low intelligence quotient.
The system.
I would say low intelligence quotients, more like have no sensory organs, whatsoever. Brain,
I think
yes, they just don't have anything to deliver information to that brain to do anything.
Now, I don't know about Britain. In America, you have to remember that the public school systems are run by each individual municipality, receiving funding from the state and then regulated by the federal government, and all three of those things are separate. These local governments know things are bad. However, the higher up the food chain, they know things are bad, but they have very different views on why they are bad.
Okay. What would be? Can you give us examples of the different views
I'll
at play?
give you, yes. The urban teachers and the urban school systems, again, like my mother and her coworkers, clearly can tell you that the family system is the problem and that they are being asked to do the impossible and that they want really for the school system to go back to, offering different opportunities. They do believe that these kids are being forced, and they'll tell you, these kids are being forced to do the impossible, basically, especially by the time you're getting into high school. If you give a high school teacher, an Algebra 2 high school teacher, a student who can barely divide because the grammar schools failed them so badly, you're asking the impossible.
Yeah, you're just asking for a pro. The kid is just going to get systematically brutalized and humiliated by the system.
Yes, and that's what happens.
Feedback loop.
And then they drop out.
With possibly a burning hatred of a number of subjects.
In particular, the hatred of the system of education, which they pass on to their children sometimes.
Yeah,
also,
and like this led to a structural devaluing of intellectual skills. It's just a negative feedback loop.
Yes. Now, on the other hand, for example, when we had a new head of the school system, or shall we say we had a new head of the city, they called in a suburbanite school head to run our school system. And their solution was to bring in this exact same school structure that was used in the suburbs. In particular, their belief was the problem with the school system was its archaic and authoritarian nature, and that the students should lead the education, which is what you do in the suburbs. The students, I forgot the name, participatory education, something like that. I forget. Basically, you let the students guide the class.
Yeah, that was a claptrap back in my day as well.
Now, in the suburbs, again, this system does not have, for all of its weirdness, it works. Students are relatively highly motivated. Their families are very involved. Generally in America, suburbanites are paranoid about their kids getting an education and getting a job because they're terrified of the ever devaluation of degrees and desperate to keep their family status. So they, we have private daycares in the United States, like special daycares for 2-year-olds you have to test into, right? People in the suburbs are paranoid.
Oh, that's nothing unique to America.
Oh, I think most Anglo countries have that. I don't know about Latin Europe, but the Anglo countries do that.
The sections of the middle class are known to be completely hysterical about social status. So,
okay,
it would not surprise me if we had the exact same dynamic.
Right, but imagine that system, not the stupid, private pre-Ks, but the whole let the students guide the class, dumped into the middle of the urban, dysfunctional family unit.
I shouldn't laugh because it's sad, but
you understand the moronicness of this decision.
Yep.
Yes. It was a complete disaster. And, of course, the state system's decision was this system failed because the local government, the local public schools were too authoritarian and couldn't do it right. Because it works so well in the suburbs. It must be the school system that failed, not the fact that it just doesn't work in the same... You're talking about two totally different societies. No, that's not the issue, because we all are part of the same society. There's no difference in people. The child.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that. You could say that there was an Iberian typology of education in the inner city.
Motherfucker.
That is no. Actually, yes, that is That is exactly what they're going for. They're saying it's the school system that is archaic and too rigid, and it's the teacher's fault.
It's the perfect parallel.
I hate the fact that it's the perfect parallel.
But but it's America. It's America, McCosk. What do you think? What do you expect?
To a certain degree, yes. The system is not well. I mean, the system in general is not adapted to like people who think differently. I'm talking about neurodivergent people who also struggle. Like for them, the education system is just torture because it's like just not structured at that level to deal with neurodivergence. Which is in of itself something that's been talked about solutions, but none has yet been put in practice. So we can't even tell which one of them would work and which one of them don't. But you do have a point that the system, to a degree, is maladapted to, well, I wouldn't say the overwhelming majority of its students, but to a significant portion, say 40%. Yeah, because to get a person who has absolutely no goddamn background, interest from their parents or anywhere else in their life, to get an interest in the letters and the arts, you need a radically different approach. If we are to keep single track, deaf to practical education, what have you, then at least we must adopt a different attitude towards education with people who come from the dysfunctional families, because otherwise it's like this. God, I was about to give an example of an image, but like that. But I don't know if either of you have seen the image. But it's like treating everyone the same does not necessarily mean that that's the right thing to do. Some people have more disadvantages than others, and other people have more advantages than others. They should not all be given an equal slice of bread.
Are you talking about the picture where they're watching a sporting event through a fence and they're standing on crates, and there's one where they have one? Yeah. We'll put it in the description.
Yes, I think. No, yes, exactly. But we do that here because of like I said, political, sociological bent of the country.
Yeah, literally. Egalitarianism full force as opposed to what's the other one?
Equity.
Equitable.
To equitarianism.
No.
Fuck it, it's now a thing. It's now a thing. I don't care. You torture me with Iberian typology of state. I torture you with made up English words.
Fair dues.
So yeah, it's like, yeah, a literalist understanding of, well, it's not a literalist understanding, like this is just egalitarianism in function and form. Vis-a-vis a greater focus on fucking hell, it's so difficult to say.
Equitable.
Equity, that's the one. Rather than a focus on equity, which would be A, more resource efficient, and B, more effective, is I think is what is lacking, because
Yes.
because like, let's be honest here, I do not come from a structured family, but there were some rough patches, and let's just say that due to some elements I can't fucking do maths to save my life. I just can't, and I have a low-key seething hatred of maths and maths education. A corollary to this fact was the fact that I had tremendous difficulty just writing in general. My handwriting is still fucking atrocious. In fact, every single year of high school, I kept having my teachers telling me I would fail the next year because of my handwriting. Finished fucking university now, bitches. What are you gonna say? But like, to say that I managed to do this almost by luck and stubbornness, like this was not a good process, that I often feel I managed to do it by fluke, because I had other grades I was good at, like history and later on geography, that really saved me. And that was like completely and totally down to the fact that I had a good individual teacher that took their time to teach me shit. Not to say that my Portuguese or maths teachers were bad. In fact, amongst them I had some very fantastic teachers under which I scored the highest grades. barely above passing on both cases, sadly. Um, but like even I, who would technically be considered a success case, though doubtful, like even I can point out that you don't even necessarily have to come from a destructured family to just run into problems with the structure in of itself. Like I think the point that was made somewhere along this episode, like that the structure in of itself has issues unrelated to the fact that like its mission has been inflated to also do the role of the parents, which it can't. I think that like some element, like for example, homework could easily be abolished. Like you cannot reasonably convince me that homework is useful now as like a tool to understand like student progression and apprehension of information.
Well, I think writing papers was still good, but if you're talking about regular, good old-fashioned, just doing the math problems 15 times,
No, but the concept of homework presupposes child labor. That,
yes.
like it
Okay.
just presupposes, yes, child labor is still real. Therefore, we must have homework to encourage the child to focus on to study late at night after their work, which this shouldn't be having. Like you cannot reasonably tell me that because like that's what it was made to. Like the kid can't be all the time in class. The classes are short and brief, and class attendance rate is spotty at best, largely because the kid needs to work to provide for the family, etc., etc., etc. Not to say that this sad reality doesn't currently exist, but at least in America, I would hope, is no longer the statistical reality for the vast majority of
Yes.
children.
No.
So like the underlying dynamic of homework makes no longer sense because classes are longer, attendance rate, while far from perfect, is much fucking higher than it was in the I don't fucking know 1800s. Like the concept of homework just no longer makes any sense, and many a kid can tell you that homework just fucking does nothing, blows, and many people think is delivered is created out of spite. So
But
Was created out of
McCosk,
spite.
But McCosk, you must remember, modern parents need free time to watch TV.
I mean, how would that be even an issue? Like the kids would probably be watching YouTube on their phones rather than watching TV. Who the fuck under
good
the
point.
age of 30 watches TV?
Oh no, you in the suburbs, parents have to keep their kids doing something at all times. If they're not doing homework, then they must be at football or baseball or karate or guitar or violin.
They can be in even longer sessions of baseball or karate.
But they have to join them at those sessions, and that is torture.
Yeah, but you just
Can
you
we
just
tell
hand them off at
suburban
the.
parents to go fucking grow a pair or thicker skin or ovaries or whatever is appropriate to the specific suburban parent?
You know,
Oh God.
can we alter their anatomy in some way that their behavior becomes more preferable?
Maybe they shouldn't live in suburbs where where children have to be at home all day and can't go anywhere because suburbs make it impossible to have civil society.
But can't the children just play in the woods? I don't, That's
Oh God,
good.
no! They'll be kidnapped. They'll be kidnapped. They'll be killed
By the badgers?
by that one guy the parents saw on TV. This is a
Oh, yeah,
totally
that's
different
true.
conversation. This is a totally different conversation about why the suburbs are a terrible idea.
Yeah, it's a
all
related
related.
conversation.
It's all
related.
Like,
It is
but
related.
But you do touch on a topic like that was a complaint I've actually heard from actual U.S. teachers, how like the parents have like an undue absurd amount of influence that just does not help with teacher morale.
No. It's really bad.
It's like, yeah, that's
Especially in the
another thing we have to
suburbs.
Well, yes, we're rapidly realizing that the spirit of white picket fences is still very much alive in the American
Oh
discourse.
yes. Oh yes. That plus Republican. I should take that back. It's not actually Republican. That plus American capitalist fear of losing status. But remember, we don't have nobility. There is no. Everyone's equal. But send your children to the $100,000 a year private kindergarten so they can get into a private university one day and keep their status. But everyone's equal.
Yeah. Turns out when everyone is declared equal, people start obsessing about just how equal they are.
Yes. Oh, I should mention this though, Makas. Speaking of, let's try and get more paths, especially for neurodivergent people. We are doing the. Remember how you said the system must know it's broken? No, we're doing the opposite. Thank the state governments. There was a time when, neurodivergent people had their own classes. This is no longer the case. Now they're in the same class with everyone else. Because equality.
Oh boy, that's.
Also, so that was the Republicans who did that one. The Democrats have decided that it's wrong to have classes that are honors or, advanced classes. So they're just going to get rid of those, and everyone will be in the same class.
It's very Bolshevik. It's no classes at all.
No. Everyone will be the same. Because everything is racist.
Although obviously the Bolsheviks had a very high belief in honors classes.
Yes, they did, which is funny.
Yeah.
Go to communist China. You better, if you don't pass the high school examinations, you're screwed. But no, it's no. The system does it, especially at the higher end. The system blames the local systems for their problem, while the local systems blame the general system for their problem, and therefore, they keep making the wrong decisions.
Yeah, nothing works. Christ.
Because no one is willing to say what I think is the real problem, which is deindustrialization screwed the urban inner cities. And the only real solution is to give the families jobs that can actually support them.
No, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I don't care. Single jobs, like a person having to do three different jobs to make a living, is not a living. It's a slow death.
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. Work also, men, 20-year-old men, 25-year-old men, do not gain any satisfaction from working at McDonald's. They gain no prestige from working at McDonald's. And no woman wants to marry them if they're working at McDonald's. Therefore, you're just furthering first criminal activity because that's a guaranteed way of making more money. And single parenthood because women won't marry you, but they'll still sleep with you.
Oh boy.
No, really, I think it's not a coincidence. Every stereotype about quote unquote the ghetto comes out post 1970 for a reason. Britain and America deindustrialized and abandoned their inner cities. And then later, in America, our solution to the situation was saying it's because they're black.
While in the UK, the solution was, we're not letting them die, we're actively killing them.
And then you blame the school systems for the kids not becoming scientists.
Never mind that not everyone should become a scientist.
No, everyone should become a computer programmer. Everyone should become a computer programmer.
That's true. I mean, Boris even made a poster about how ballet dancers should learn information security software. That will be in the description as well, because that's what we do now.
Because apparently
Here is
we
an
can't live in a
interesting
society
question.
where ballet,
Here is an
where
interesting.
where ballet can make
Oh, go
a
on.
living.
That was a thing at one time, though.
It was a thing in one time, yes, a long, long time ago.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you both, gentlemen. Why do you believe this is the case that the right has developed this mentality when it comes to education, that the only education that matters is you know, they wouldn't use the word practical education, but hard education, and that theoretical education has no value, which seems to be a very common thing among the modern right.
Oh, it's simple. Well, it's not simple. There's actually multiple ways you could use to explain that. But a big one is people who go to liberal courses vote liberal and not Republican. Therefore, on a rather asinine but you can get where they're coming from logic. If we get people to not get liberal arts, we produce less liberals, ergo more votes for us.
I mean,
That's
there's a
moronic.
reason liberal. Yeah, I mean, look, it has liberal right there in the name.
Oh yes, that's what the. Yes. Ugh. No, but
Like,
I mean, it's strange when the right is saying poetry, music, literature, valueless.
Valueless.
You would think the Marxist would say that, not the quote unquote conservative.
well, depends on your experience with Marxists, to be perfectly honest.
Good point. A lot of Marxists. I'm just saying. I'm not actually talking about real Marxists and real conservatives. Oddly, I'm talking about the ideal. Lots of Marxists. You can see why many Marxists are about practicality, especially Marxist-Leninists.
Well, sure, they're big on practicality, but I don't think they're practicality reductivists.
Interesting. Okay.
But yeah, the point is like, why do they do this? Is also like perhaps a more charitable viewpoint is that like they like think about employment basically, in that especially in the American society where say investment in culture is not truly extant, and therefore the chances of you making it out in ballet are very narrow. Like we must at least make the show of not assuming that not everything done by a believer in republicanism is necessarily out of ignorant malice, just out of ignorant incompetence. So we have to make we have to make that attempt. Like I can see a logic where they think they're actually doing a good thing by discouraging people from that to adopt a kind of to a quote unquote realistic attitude towards their future.
All right. I get it. I get it. It's just
Just doesn't
depressing.
pan out.
It's just depressing. It's a complete cultural hollowing out of the right, which just gives the left
Cultural and
free reign.
intellectual.
Yes. It just gives the
Cultural,
left free reign, which is bad. It's bad when anyone has free reign because then they're likely to do dumber things than they normally would.
True enough, but like, you, the American right, though the right in an abstract as well, I guess, always had an anti-intellectualist bent.
Well,
Like,
I wouldn't say the British right did pre Margaret Thatcher.
sure, they to an extent did like, but like I do genuinely think that most like probably maybe it never became a dominant strain or what have you, but a lot of because like if we are to be absolutely like reductionist, like the beating heart of the right as we modern as we understand it today goes back to like romanticism, to to to
Yes.
to to, to phone to phone in on the previous episode, I guess, and like a focus on emotion and etc. And the purity of the man and blah blah blah. So you already had a kind of you had a kind of anti-intellectualist bent.
Maybe I see what you mean. Maybe less anti-intellectualist, more because these people were, the Romantics were intellectuals, but they were certainly anti-scientific or scienticism at some point. They
Yeah,
yeah,
but like nowadays both have there's a correlation of almost 1-to-1 to those two in people's
good
minds.
point. Good point. Yes,
Like
good
like
point.
what I'm saying is that like yeah, you always did sort of had an anti-intellectualism bend in the right wing since time immemorial, essentially. Like it's always there. The exact reasons and justifications varied tremendously from the belief that while a nice to have, it's not a necessary. A person is still able to, like, intrinsically has the knowledge and capabilities to essentially like sort themselves out, basically, which va- uh, which depending upon the context is actually is a good thing. Like educate more or less education should not give you more or less rights, which is is if we are to have a positive outlook on it, the origin point of this. It's just that it has since gone warped.
Well, I mean, yes. Also, I do think that that is a point we should make. More or less education should not affect your rights. I, I think we should state that we all agree with that. Even if you
Well,
are
yes,
for favor of practical education. Yeah.
well, yeah, but like the issue is that this is not even like stating like a political choice. We're stating that it shouldn't, but it does because that's what we're living in. People who have less
Yes.
education are statistically less likely to know their rights and therefore to know what they can do when under state abuse or like, for example, a common thing over here is health benefits and health benefits, injuring benefits, just in general, a lot of shit you have an intrinsic right to, as the Constitution in Portugal says. Like, people, because the process is not automatic and you have to kind of fucking struggle with the bureaucracy for a bit to get these subsidies you're entitled to, a lot of people who first don't know that those subsides exist, don't have the like necessary skills to struggle with the bureaucracy, don't make use of those rights. So it is a sad truth that it does impact your rights. So like,
You're right. It's true.
but like this, but like I mean, but this, but a case can be made that that's not really an issue of the education system. That's an issue of like the fucking bureaucracy being labyrinthine and almost designed uh, to be unreachable and impenetrable. So like I'll forward to the position that this is not necessarily a consequence of the education system, but of other things surrounding the education system, which has been a theme. Like a lot of
Yeah.
like the education system is important, yes, but like a lot of maleases that it has no impact on, but is impacted by, are often like foisted onto the education system.
Absolutely. To be honest, that to go back to what I said at the beginning, that is one of the critical problems. It's the fact that the problems are vastly deeper and mostly societal. But because it's taboo to discuss them, the result is that the only answer people can turn to is the education system. Despite the fact that people clearly know that it's not an answer because, at least in America, people are abandoning the public schools en masse. Everyone's looking for an option other than the public schools because the public schools have a dreadful reputation, which they don't deserve because they don't teach worse than anyone else. They don't. It's just that if you take all the talented students out, if you take every student from a functional family out of a school system, all you're left with is students from dysfunctional families. And whenever you put, how do I be careful to say this? Whenever you,
Whenever
it
you remove the
becomes,
whenever you remove the best ones to scholarships, to what have you, the grade average falls. And if you're evaluating your educational performance based off average grade per class, that kind of creates a negative feedback loop.
Yes, but not only that. If you have, and this is the advantage of having a more mixed class or a mixed school. If you have more integrated mixed neighborhoods and more integrated mixed school systems, it's easier to teach because the students first can help each other. The students that are more motivated can provide more of a, I don't want to say an example, but a competition
Support,
for the students.
Motivated students typically are very much okay with helping other students.
And it's not just that, they are a motivation. Because when you have a class that's just kids from dysfunctional families who don't care about education, there is zero motivation to work hard. Because everyone doesn't want to work hard. It's almost, if you're the kid that works hard, everyone looks at you like, you're a weirdo.
You're a class
traitor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, that is kind of a thing. You're a traitor to your class. It becomes, you end up with some very negative societal,
implications and dynamics.
Yes, but if you have a mixed class where, some kids are working really hard, that it can go one of two ways. It can harm the lower motivation students, but it can also provide, depending on how the teacher and the school system manages it, it can provide motivation for them. It can provide them motivation to work harder and try, out of pure competition, to not get beat.
Yeah, I can see that logic. It also just helps because, as my understanding, class grade averages are kind of thrown in the face of students all the goddamn time over there, which if everyone is low scoring and the average is very bad, that tends to have a demotivating effect.
Why do you think we've made rules that you basically can't fail kids?
Jesus Christ almighty.
And then, America's insanity. School systems are punished if they don't have a high enough grade average.
By what? Privation of funds?
It can be privation of funds, but that's rare. More likely, the firing of the entire bureaucracy and the state will take over the school system and gut it from head to toe, and install people from different school systems and from different towns who know less about the actual people in that town and are generally from the suburbs, because those suburbs have higher grade averages, and then they bring their suburban school tactics to the inner cities, which, well,
doesn't work.
We've discussed. You see how this just becomes an insidious, constant feedback loop of this? Yes.
Well, no wonder the education system is collapsing.
Yes. And like you said, you asked, does the system know it's failing? Yes. Does it know why it's failing? I'm not sure.
So what you're telling me is, I mean, the tragedy of this is that in absolute technicality, the system isn't failing, is that society has degraded to the point that it is no longer adequate to the system.
Yes, especially in the urban inner cities. And again, I put this fact.
In the rural areas as well.
In the rural areas as well. And in both cases, it is nothing to do with the people who live there and everything to do with the economic system that we've created, which abandons these areas and therefore their people to privation and depression and therefore drug use and, societal malaise, which always comes when you... Yes. When you purposely impoverish an area, don't expect it to perform. But we're America, and we're individualistic. Every person has, it's in personal responsibility.
It's, God damn it, it's genuinely depressing.
Yes.
still,
Yes.
I mean, what can you? I mean, but like the root cause is simple. Like, yeah, the family structure is falling apart, largely due to
Mm-hmm.
economic reasons. Though there are other less important but still relevant factors contributing to that. But like economics is the big one,
Yes.
and like how do you
Un-
fix that?
Unfortunately, here, what we're seeing is that the middle class, and particularly the shall I say the upper middle class, the upper echelon,
Yeah, the
who
upper middle class
benefits,
is an acceptable term. Yes.
yes, they have not only immuned themselves from the causes of the societal disintegration, they have now made it so that they not only benefit from it, but they've created an entire society based on it. Again, testing 2-year-olds to get into private elite kindergartens so they can then go to private elite grammar schools and then private elite high schools to go to a Ivy League school, which will get them the high paying job, which will ensure they too can send their children to the elite, pre-K nursery school. They have made a system based off of this, which allows them to, on one hand, declare that they worked harder and they worked for it, while simultaneously giving themselves all the advantages in the world.
Yep.
Therefore, they can justify their status as an aristocracy while claiming pure equality, while knowing it's all a lie.
Well, I doubt they know it's all a lie.
They
That's
must.
just not chief. Like you know as well as I know that like part of the issue with contemporary social, economic, and political elites in the West is that because the law and society in a functional way assumes they don't exist, nothing additional is asked of them.
Good point.
Like like that is just like an issue with the quote unquote egalitarianism of the contemporary West. Like hierarchy, elites, and what have you are just a natural phenomena of humanity living in society. To deny that they exist is to let them to fester. We ask less now from multimillionaires, industry and thought leaders and what have you than we've asked of actual feudal land-owning nobility.
You're totally right. You're totally right. I'll give an example of this, McCusk. Do you know there's is Yale? Yale University has a wall memorializing the dead from World War One who were their students. This wall, well, they have a list of the people that left university to go fight in the infantry because they were the elites of their era and believed it was their duty to go die. There is no equivalent wall for Vietnam, for the Vietnam War, or for the Gulf War, or for any recent conflict. Because, as you say, even 100 years ago, there was some concept that, yes, you are an undeserving aristocracy. You have to serve your country. This idea has vanished, and so therefore they just send the children of the poor to go fight their wars. Roman style.
Yes. Again, like the elites can't exist because we're all equal. How dare you demand more from us? We are the same as you.
Yes. Absolutely.
Again, we touch upon this topic on one of the more theoretically oriented episodes. What was it? The one where we criticized libertarianism and egalitarianism, and like how they seem okay on paper, but turns out that the actual execution of them are trash. Because haha, got you, dear listener. You thought this was a podcast by some egalitarian pro leftist group, but we have bamboozled you. You're in fact talking to and listening to the educational musings of three hardline absolutists.
I don't think
So
Bronze is a
there.
hardline absolutist. I don't think Bronze is a hardline absolutist.
I'm the hardest of the hard.
Oh, okay. Well, well, okay.
Well, I don't. That was.
Is a,
Well, I don't know how you define that, but you know.
Yeah,
McCosk's assertion is sustained. I'm sorry.
not the intensity of it, but the base assertion that no, we are not secretly leftists who value egalitarianism. No, we are in fact anti-egalitarian. We're pro equity and social hierarchy, because then we can integrate the naturally emergent social hierarchies into political society, and therefore demand what we should have always been demanding, extra of them in both a social and economic capacity.
And this goes back to education. The myth that every class is equal has resulted in us just abandoning the poor, because we can't even would you say tautology?
We can't even conceptualize the reality of the situation properly.
Yes, exactly. We can't even. There's no way for us to conceptualize the facts that, yes, this class of people is doing worse than that class of people because of classism and the fact that hierarchies exist and the whole economic and societal structure. And it's not just because, public schools are bad.
Because they're too authoritarian.
Yes. And because unless you're a Republican, then it's public schools are bad because they're run by the government.
Tweedledee and Tweedledumbest.
Yeah.
Yeah, but something charter school, something.
Oh no, oh my God, you have no idea. It's so over the top here. Again, it's anything that's. Can I be blunt?
Oh, absolutely.
Any excuse for white parents and Asian parents not to send their kids with the blacks.
Segregation.
It's
still.
Yes, entirely.
I mean, it's what was it? Was it Malcolm X who was saying that the back then, but I know that it still holds up statistically today, that the North has the most extremely segregated school system.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my God.
Where the South, even with all its flaws, it's still comparatively the least segregated.
Well, you know why that is, right?
Yeah, because they took deliberate steps to try to fix some shit.
Yeah. No, it was actually less segregated even before the 1960s, for a very simple reason. You know why?
Why?
Because segregation was illegal. In other words, in the South, you couldn't go to the same schools. You couldn't go to the same theater. You couldn't go to the same anywhere. Therefore, even if you lived in the same neighborhood as black people in Atlanta, you were still segregated from them. In the North, where this wasn't the law, cities and states had to go and create segregation by imposing boundaries artificially. So, creating example in the state of New Jersey, where they created an insane number of small towns purposely to divide whites and blacks from each other, unofficially. Therefore, to create all of these school systems where blacks would be on this side of the line and whites on that side of the line, while in the South, even if blacks lived literally across the street from you, which was common in many small southern towns, no, they just couldn't go to your school because they're black.
So when segregationism was abolished, the South did not have the institutional and structural ability to maintain segregation in a functional capacity, and was forced to actually fix the issue as well, as best as it could,
yes,
or as best as it wanted. The North simply kept on with its functional segregation.
Yes. Great example, Atlanta. Once the system of 2 schools for every neighborhood, basically you had 2 schools for every district. A white school, which was very good, and a black school, which was normally a wooden shack. Once this system was abolished, you now had 1 school per neighborhood, or they made it the grammar school and the high school. And then there was only 1 neighborhood school for everyone, and everyone went to the school because it was the that normally, like I said, you'd have one side of the street black, one side of the street white. Whereas in the North, we had gone through a century of concocting all of these boundaries of within neighborhoods, of shoving the Italians in this neighborhood, shoving the Irish in that neighborhood, shoving the blacks over here, shoving the Polish over there, shoving the Jews over there, shoving the Puerto Ricans over there. So that when officially segregation was declared totally legal in the country, nothing changed in the North. The whole neighborhood was Italian already. The teachers were Italian. The cops were Italian. We just constructed a whole system where the Italians lived there and the Jews lived there, and they had their own school and their own everything, and it just perpetuated. Because segregation we don't have segregation in the North. What are you talking about? That doesn't exist here. No.
The Southern thing.
Yeah, the South does that.
And because the belief that there is no segregation is so strong, no one can even realize it.
Yep. And so what you now have, and I give the example of New York City. In egalitarianism 101, center point is full of private schools. Full of them. The best example of this is Harlem. Have you heard of Harlem, gentlemen? It's famous, but maybe not in Europe.
We've heard of it. Yeah, it's in Amsterdam, right?
Yeah, that is
it was also a type
Harlem.
Of shake.
That was a joke.
And it was also a type of shake that people used to do.
Yes, from the city, from the town. Harlem was once a city. It was then annexed by New York. It's the northern half of New York, of the island of Manhattan, the northern third, more accurately. North 125th Street. This is the black neighborhood. At one time, it was a very wealthy, middle-class black area. If you look at it, it's full of beautiful row houses, because this is where the segregated black elite lived. They couldn't live anywhere else, so they were forced to create their own neighborhoods. This is where you had black doctors and black lawyers and black everything. Then, when the migration from African Americans from the South to the North happened, it was all the blacks had to live there, and the neighborhood declined. And so when segregation ended, every black person from the middle class jumped ship and left. So Harlem is full of beautiful, absolutely gorgeous mansions, but inhabited entirely for a long time by very poor people. The school system, as you might imagine, is and was a disaster since the 1960s. But because the housing stock is gorgeous, since New York is beginning to revive, or has been reviving, large numbers of... Yes.
Like
large numbers.
No it's just been gentrified, with the poor people being kicked out to other neighborhoods.
Yes. Harlem was the last holdout on Manhattan because it was so bad and had such a terrible reputation. Like a lot of the 90s black exploitation movies, the stereotypical black American movies of the 90s where crime and drugs, it's Harlem or the neighboring South Bronx. Well, starting about 10 years ago, because the housing stock, as I mentioned, is basically beautiful mansions in beautiful traditional style streets, huge numbers of white suburbanites have begun moving in. But the schools are still 90% black. You can imagine what white suburbanites, despite the fact that this is New York and these people are probably voting for Bernie Sanders, you can imagine that they have no interest in sending their children to Malcolm X High School, or Martin Luther King High School, or Marcus Garvey High School, or any of these high schools named after great black leaders, but whose student population is entirely made up of, poor African Americans. They have no interest.
Yes,
you can imagine.
I'm sure they want to send their kids to. Oh God, I forgot his name. Who was the leader of the Silver Legion of America?
Oh God, I forgot. Oh God, I know what you mean, though. I know what you mean.
Edward
Yes.
Peely, Dudley Peely,
Oh,
Dudley Peely
God.
Grammar School.
They probably would feel more comfortable. But I mean, these people, mind you, they are the most progressive. These people believe in every progressivism. They believe in diversity and inclusion, except when it comes to their own life.
Well, of course, it's it's easy. It's oh God, this is going to sound atrocious. But I am quoting here well, paraphrasing, because this is, I remember a quote. I think it was like in a movie or something about how it's easy. It's easy to be. It's easy to be pro-black when you live in a white majority in a white majority neighborhood.
Yeah, because then
the tragic implication of this quote apparently implying that if people lived in black majority neighborhoods they would be racists is kind of absurd. But like I think there is a more positive truth in the quote of like a lot of these are just progressives for show.
yes. Also, again, it's really, again, these people will say they are pro-black. They will. They put Black Lives Matter. One of the most aggravating things for me to see is a gentrified neighborhood. Recently gentrified neighborhood with lots of Black Lives Matter flags up. The irony.
After they participated on the ruthless home
displacement.
Displacement. That's the word. Displacement of the black population in there.
Yes, this is very common. These people argue strongly for diversity. They believe in it. These are the people that protested at the Black Lives Matter rallies. But when it comes time for them to send their children to school, I mean, some of these people they're so progressive. They believe in government. They're strong believers in equality. But then when it comes to time for rubber to meet the road, they have to choose where they're sending their children to school, their neighborhood, regular old public school. These people will always, well, 90% of them send their children to the elite charter school, which just opened up down the road because this neighborhood is starting to gentrify. And they know these people will not send their kids to public school.
Yeah, so basically, something, scratch a liberal, a fascist bleed, something.
Okay. I've never heard that one before, but okay.
Hey, that one's a classic.
Oh, God. It annoys me greatly. Truly.
I mean, Juanito, like, you know history. Like, like this is rapid, but like, why do you think it was the upper middle class, the main ranks, and like the main ranks of the Nazi Party?
Yeah,
like,
I know.
Do you think that was by chance, mate?
No, it's not by chance.
It was by chance that the vast majority of the Nazi Party elite were all previously social democrats.
No, it's not. It's also not a. It's not a. It's not a coincidence that the progressive movement in the United States in the late 1800s was incredibly racist and believed in like social Darwinism.
Oh come on!
I don't know why.
It's still racist today. It's still fucking racist today. Like the issue is that rather than enforcing white stereotypes about African Americans, they're now taken the joy and indeed fact sadistic pleasure of enforcing African American stereotypes about African Americans.
Yes, that's an interesting. Wow, that's a very interesting statement.
Like
huh.
like I haven't seen this in real in my own two eyes. A, because COVID, and B, because I think I would have a stroke. But on the internet, I have essentially seen white upper middle class white ass fucks telling an African American to essentially act black, which is like,
yes,
it is. I mean, and this is, and we're talking about African Americans, but like one of those that this actually impacted a friend of ours, whereupon she essentially faced discrimination because she's a Native American, but is a Catholic, and she essentially faced discrimination from the part of Native Americans and white people because she was a Native American but did not follow the Native American traditional faith. There is self-evidently no kind of internalized racism on part of the Native Americans, and just straight up racism on the part of the whites. Much like there is no way whatsoever when African Americans tell other African Americans to act black, and white people say much the same to African Americans. There's no racism internalized or otherwise in this. No, sir. No, that's insane.
Oh no,
none at all.
Yes, it's It's so bad. Also, big point. Just something to say. Because a lot of people don't know this. Modern, like when they say act black, like, and I know McCosk is a general despiser of the concept of nationalism, but this is a form of devolved, degenerated nationalism.
Yeah, it's
This
black nationalism.
There is one way to act black thing.
Yeah.
Never has been the case. What they mean when they say that.
Hasn't. Like one of the major conflicts of the 70s to 80s in post-segregated U.S. was between the quote-unquote old guard essentially the old guard of the black elites under segregation vis-a-vis the newly emancipated poor blacks. Like that's like if you go look up video, like early reactions amongst the African American community with the rise of rap, for example. Like this is very clearly a divide. Like there was clearly multiple ways of acting black.
Oh yes, absolutely. This is one of my problems with.
Let me correct that one. There were clearly multiple ways of being black, because just like there's multiple ways of a person being whatever. It's the narrow down of only one specific life experience, one specific attitude, one specific yada 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 that constitutes nationalism.
Yes, exactly. That was one of the greatest divides in black culture. And this thing, there are multiple black cultures that share some things. They all share certain elements together, clearly.
Allow me to correct. You make it seem as if the divide ceased to exist.
The divide is there. The divide has changed.
The divide still exists. There's merely another divide that's taken the limelight.
Yes. True. Now I will say this.
Just let me finish. The sad thing about the society of spectacle in which we live in is that we go from crises to crises without solving the previous crises.
Yes. So I would say this is one of my problems with one of the rights, one of the bays of the right, Thomas Sowell is very much the old school Harlem elite, and he clearly has discriminatory attitudes towards, quote unquote, the lower class, basically the blacks that came from the South in the 1960s to his perfect bucolic Harlem of the 1950s, which was entirely upper middle class, and he basically thinks that the blacks who came up in the 1960s ruined Harlem for him. Just to put that out there. But also, people forget that African Americans from different regions of the South had quite different cultures. You had the coastal African Americans whose culture was much closer to Africa than anyone else's because they lived on these isolated islands in the swamps of South Carolina and Georgia. You had the very French Creole population, which, from Louisiana. You had all these different cultures. But then the 1980s happened. So let me ask you something. From what you know, where do most African Americans live in the United States? Do you know where?
South.
Yes. For some reason, people think most African Americans live in urban ghettos, when this is not the case. It is only the case because TV.
Yeah, but that's like structural. But that's like just true. Like logistically speaking, an urban ghetto requires economic depression. America did not suffer a major economic recession during the 1980s, at least to my memory. My actual knowledge of the history of the Americans is lackluster.
Well, there was a Black Friday stock crash. Black Friday, not as in the thing where you buy loads of stuff. It's a different kind of. It was a crash that was on a Friday in 1987, but that's not really the same thing.
No.
Yeah,
there was a massive economic crash in the 70s.
Yeah, but America was not in an economic tailspin of death and increasing poverty. Like its economy was growing, basically.
But not the urban economy, of course. The urban area's economy was nuked in the 70s and never really recovered until the early 2000s.
And then
But
died
the-
again with 2008.
Yeah. But you see, the media only doesn't care about the rural South, right? The media has no interest in the rural South. It doesn't have any cultural influence. So the media, which is mostly run out of New York and LA, pretty much only depicts urban black culture. It pretty much just depicts black culture in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, despite the fact that is a minority of black culture. But because it is the cultural, the culturally dominant one, not because of its own work, but rather because of the media's obsession with it, you get this thing of black people that don't conform to that, despite the fact that it's the majority, are viewed as not acting black enough. You end up with weird things of like urban kids from Harlem saying to, kids who grew up in stinking Georgia, you don't act black. Weird statement.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow,
God.
This started. On
This was about it.
education.
I was about to, yeah. It's good.
Well, I mean, it's hey. This just means we'll have an even more interesting episode title.
What the heck is this episode
I
going to
mean,
be titled?
Who knows?
Three absolutists discuss structural racism and the educational system. Just the absurdity. I'm branding you an absolutist. Just give me your hand there and I'll cattle brand you. God damn it.
Okay, do it. Just do it. I'll take it for now.
No, that's probably not going to be the title. But I'll think of something.
I was going to say, though, at the beginning of this, we could have posted this on, like, a Marxist site, and they would have accepted, like, the first 30 minutes of this.
That's usually how it goes.
Yeah,
They would have even accepted the last 30 minutes of it. It's that middle part, though. That middle part they would have had a problem with.
Yeah, the one where we revealed ourselves, again, to be monarchists, to have spicy takes on human nature and hierarchy and social obligation.
Except that most of our spicy takes would be accepted by BreadTube.
Yeah, but let's be perfectly honest here. Being accepted by BreadTube is a bad thing, in no matter the case.
Oh, it is?
Bro, if they
Yeah, we're calling out BreadTube.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, maybe we'll get more views. No, it's like the issue is that it's unclear if if BreadTubers actually understand Marxism-Leninism. Even though me and Bronze are no fucking masters of the subject, like sometimes based upon some take, I'm just now having flashbacks of fucking Vaush saying that Marx was a liberal. He wanted to make liberalism gooder, better, and I'm like, Jesus Christ Almighty.
Did he say that? He said that?
Yes, I was provided a clip. It was a long while ago, but yeah.
He's saying that Marxism is just better liberalism.
At least that's what the clip was.
Okay, I think that on that bombshell, we can
conclude. Yes.
Yeah.
This is.
In conclusion, education sucks. Go on.
Oh, come on, nah.
Yeah, go play in the woods. Don't go to school.
Still go to school though. It sucks, but you have to do it, Chief.
Yes.
This has been Monarchism Unfiltered. I've been one of your hosts, McCosk.
I've been Bronze.
And I've been the uninvited guest.
Good night.